Negative consequences. The freedom to express oneself in any way entails a reduction in the freedom to practice etiquette with arbitrary persons in the community, and so any teaching of etiquette will rightly be seen as a contradiction and a hypocrisy. Tolerance of objectification makes some or most religion impossible to practice non-hypocritically in society. In particular, although to varying degrees, those that employ objectification techniques themselves, resulting in a combination attack on the subjective self and repression directed towards one's partner or otherwise, those that emphasize an intolerance of the unbeliever, those that rely upon one's ability to be good and do good, and those that require the maintenance of a focused mind. It is damaging to those who choose not to objectify themselves. It takes all of one's attention, which would otherwise be focused on subjects worthy of attention. By thinking or acting on the assumption that someone wants or needs objectification, one is objectifying the other, denying them subjective significance. Promotes false role models. In any given sexual encounter, the female is burdened by a child, or the destruction of an unborn child, and the male is directed no social responsibility outside of a marital contract. It can therefore be argued that until the burden of the scenario is distributed at least equally onto the male, or entirely onto the male depending upon one's views of responsibility, society should not be willing to tolerate the promotion of the desire for premarital sexual relations. In an objectification-tolerant society, the encouragement of contraception becomes justified as a means of protection against and of prevention of the natural byproduct of the encouragement to objectify. In an objectification-tolerant society, abortion becomes justified as a means to destroy the natural byproduct of the encouragement to objectify. Makes one lose confidence in their desires or any appropriate expression of their desires, allowing the formation of social constructs independent of desire, sexual equality. Prevents the formation of leaders amongst the demoralized, objectification-tolerant members of society, and allows for the formation of non-traditional leadership roles. Tolerance of objectification may result in a person having to pretend to expect to want what another of the opposite sex should want under the accepted model in order to appear to be nice. A female's natural motivating factor is to be nice, complimentary of the dominant male opinion, being the physically weaker sex. Therefore, is dependent upon social tolerances as to their role, which in turn distorts our perception of absolutes and contributes to their, and therefore all tolerance of objectification. Social roles may change as product of the tolerance of objectification. For example, people may seek alternative occupations if no one wishes to be married, have children, which is a positive feedback mechanism in itself. Apparent self-objectification may be used as a demonstration of the tolerance or adaptability to the tolerance of objectification in order to appear to be nice, friendly, or understanding. Misrepresenting someone's actions, vilification, can be used to make them question their subjective significance, and therefore subjective significance in general, thereby leading them into an acceptance of objectification, thereby harming them or repaying them for some damage caused. As objectification in the media presents the appearance of a caring and attentive subject, it may be contrasted with another's subjective worth in order to obtain a better, more caring and attentive subject, although in general this would not work as intended, as the other would realize the illusion of the presentation and therefore the error of the contrast. It reduces the availability of others who are able to offer a non-objectified relationship. One can sympathize with those of the same sex as them and can tolerate their indiscretion, as one knows how they have been offended by the objectification of those of the opposite sex. One can sympathize with those of the same sex as them and can tolerate their indiscretion, as one wants objectified people of the opposite sex to know what it feels like to be presented with an object. Tolerance of objectification makes others know what it feels like to be objectified. The viewer's subconscious fails to recognize that the apparent self-objectified person was indeed educated to undress in this particular way, not necessarily to gain attention, although quite possibly, but through a variety of other motivations, including the fulfillment of the social norm, peer pressure. The effort required for apparent self-objectification is dependent upon social circumstances, even to the extent that in society its people may be given no choice but to appear to objectify themselves based upon external norms, fashion, availability of clothing, etc. The fact that there are acknowledged limits and levels of apparent self-objectification, and that only a minority breach those acknowledged limits, means that one's willingness to involve themselves in objectification is dependent upon one's level of awareness of reality around them. The fact that one who steps over the currently acknowledged limit of allowable current self-objectification is despised, and that the current acknowledged limit keeps creeping, indicates that people don't want or need to be involved in apparent self-objectification, apart from the desire for conformity and the ability to compete. Tolerance of objectification of a particular sex makes people of the opposite sex feel responsible for that tolerance, feel guilty or ashamed for this, and therefore makes them wish to treat those of that sex they are responsible for with particular affection. Hence discrepancies in the treatment of a sex such as overprotection, e.g. affirmative action, addressing imaginary needs which may or may not exist, and underprotection, e.g. ignoring their needs, which, since having no self-consistent, non-hypocritically basis, are naturally rebelled against. We feel guilty as a sex for our tolerance of the objectification of another sex. When another sex tolerates the objectification of our sex, we feel the need to blame the entire sex, under the presumption they are responsible for solving the problem. Tolerance of objectification may result in gender-specific activism, e.g. feminism. When someone is objectified as a consequence of their tolerance of the objectification of one's own sex, one may laugh at the contradiction. When someone is objectified as a consequence of their tolerance of the objectification of one's own sex, one may gain moral confidence. When someone is objectified as a consequence of our action or inaction, who does not deserve it, we may feel guilty and wish to treat them especially, for example with a kindly voice such as that used to speak with a child. Someone may laugh at the contradiction when they think that they are accepting their own objectification. When another sex tolerates the objectification of our sex, we are less likely to accept an individual's attempt of that same sex to honour us, and thereby encourage their apparent self-objectification. People may involve themselves in apparent self-objectification as a reaction to, or to neutralise another's attempt of the same sex to avoid responsibilities implied by their physical nature, and thereby undermine the subjective value of their sex.